Not like this. Not like this.
And we are live, and I've very nearly almost started the stream again without any audio. Welcome, everybody. This is Hail Xal'atath episode 8, I believe, unless it's episode 9.
It is 8. You uploaded 2
It is
and
8,
we
yes.
got to see it.
Perfect. And today we are talking about Siren Isle. So, warning to everyone, this is a lot of PTR discussion, spoilers ahead. Hello, Manny.
Hello. How are you today?
I'm well, how are you doing?
Doing okay. I'm doing okay. I gotta ask you, of course, how has the World of Warcraft been treating you? We've been away for a bit here, so you've had some time to play. What have you been up to?
Mostly today I spent the whole day trying on the new Sylvanas outfit that's on the trading post. You know, I didn't think I would love it that much. I was like, I'm more of a Xal'atath girl now. Sylvanas, I love her, always have, but you know, it's old, it's out of date, I thought I'd like it, put it on, and then be like, okay, that's enough. It is so amazing. It is so amazing looking, and it looks especially good on a Nightborn. And I'm actually quite frustrated because currently my PTR character is wearing the hideous tier 2 Hunter transmog from the anniversary event, which, I mean, it's a transmog that just shows how much they despise hunters because what is this? I look like Spyro the Dragon.
I I can't say you're wrong. I'm not a fan of that hunter gear. It is the best they could do from a time where they clearly didn't like hunters.
You know, there are actually elements about it that I like by itself, but the problem is, altogether, it's so overpowering. It's just upsetting.
It suffers from that entire thing where hunters, they stalked whatever it was, dragon stalk or bee stalk or whatever it was, and then never found the time to go to a proper leather worker. So yeah, that's unfortunate. I also wonder why it's purple in a world where we did not have purple dragons. We had like chromatic dragons. So yeah, it is a bit of an odd one. I am lucky. I am shaman, so I will be getting the tier 2 shaman, which I still think is in the top 5 of gear from there. Maybe like we all have to hand it to Judgment. Judgment was like a renaissance of stuff. But what would you say is your second favorite
Of the tier sets,
of the
I
tier sets? So
liked.
tier 2.
I'm very much the basic girl. I like the paladin one. I think it's pretty cool, and I really like the updated one.
Yeah, that's your second favorite? I figure that's everybody's first favorite.
Well, okay, no, that is my first favorite. I'm just sort of
Yeah.
automatically classifying Hunter as my one, so it's supposed to be my favorite. It's not.
So then, okay, Paladin, definitely top of the line. Gonna ask you again. What's your second favorite?
I think I like the monk one.
The monk.
It's one of the new ones because obviously there weren't monks back during tier 2. And you know what? I am a sucker for monk transmog. I always love it. Like, I wish so much I could use. There's the one of the items that are on the trading post at the moment are those fans, the 2 fans that are like fist weapons. I wish I could just use them as some sort of bow. You know, like they're so pretty. So
They are, and like if the survival hunters weren't like pole arm spear guys, maybe you could use it in that manner. But man, I feel like monk is a distinct, very distinct style, and sometimes it's amazing. In fact, this tier's druid, not the anniversary, but what we've been getting out of Nurbar Palace. This tier's Nurbar Palace druid set feels very monk to me. And I think it works. As for my second favorite for the tier 2, I mean, I'm biased and say going to say shaman, but if I'm gonna put that aside, I have to say priest does really well with the tier 2 sets, and I'm really happy that there's all that stuff there. Warlock is another one that it's got purple, but it has stuff to offset the purple, and it comes together better than the hunter. So I'm a big fan of that. I just think that I'm hoping that they continue to put out just like really solid gear pieces like this. And with the return of these updated tier 2s, they also are bringing in just today the return of the class sets, the 3-piece class sets in the Trader's Post. And I'm noticing how those kind of work together. Have you noticed how they work together?
I haven't, but that is partly because I'm a hunter, and the 3-piece hunter set sitting in the trading post is an insult. It makes you look like a turkey. It is so depressing. So every time I see the tier sets at all, I just scroll past them.
This is definitely not true for the shaman piece. The shaman tier piece is wolves and that entire aesthetic. For tier 2, the transmog that's in the Trader's Post is definitely a Zandalari feel. But I was looking at the Paladin, because we're always looking at the Paladin, and it just works so well. So now I just want to put them all together. Maybe that could save... Maybe it could save Hunter? I don't know. Because now I'm wondering what it would look like with Hunter. I think that the best transmogs are when you like mix and match and you find stuff that work. And I think that if you could just do something with those shoulders for Hunter,
the shoulders
and that helm,
the shoulders have potential. I will say that, and at least the trading post has this bright purple cloak and hood with the new shoulder cloaks that they're bringing out. It's that bright color that works with this outfit. I do think we need a few more pieces, because I was trying desperately to put this outfit together with something else, and oh my word, the closest I got to was putting on a pair of sunglasses.
I mean, if you're an engineer and you do something like that, I could definitely see that working for you.
Yeah,
I guess. Go ahead.
I think it has potential. Unfortunately, when I do work with transmog with the various pieces, I tend to like to keep belts and boots together. And the hunter transmog has the most ridiculously stupid boots in the world. They look like giant bear claws. I don't know what they were thinking. And when they did the preview, the official preview, they showed the hunter on a Pandaren, and I'm convinced it's because they knew the Pandaren would get rid of the boots so it wouldn't look so stupid.
It's funny though, if you look at the original, I'm not sure if you have the original one, not the revised tier 2.
I don't, but I can preview it.
Okay, because the original ones are stupid. The original boots are stupid, but in a different way. In the original ones, they look like, what's the best way to describe them? Almost as if you got an ice cream cone strapped to your boots. They just flare out at the top, and they fixed it in the remake. But then they added those gigantic, like, claws at the bottom of the remake, and now the remake looks weird in a completely different way. But neither of them work. You just need to get some offset to pieces to make that correction.
Oh, man. So, but we have been talking about the anniversary and Tia this whole time. What about the PTR? Have you gotten a chance to see Siren's Isle at all?
Sorry, I
Bless you.
apologize. Yes, I have. And it's just been out for a day. Like, it literally came out late last night. So we haven't had much chance to test it. But I went through the intro sequence. I've done all of the major caves as well as the storm. And these are all events that are going to be taking place. And so the quickest comparison that I would give to this is actually Mechagon. I think that it is like Mechagon because you've got so many things that are crammed into such a small space. Like Mechagon because even after you get through it, there's actually a different phase, which is the storm phase, where different things are happening and all the normal events shut down for a little bit. And it's like Mechagon because you're constantly collecting stuff to turn in. So like I really do like comparing it against Mechagon. And the last connection is that this uses some old assets that were originally put into the files back in BFA. In fact, this is supposedly a unused treasure island sort of thing Island Expedition, thank you. That we apparently never got in BFA. And that makes sense because you've got the Kultiran architecture, you've got the Azurite. When you do that load-in screen, it is clearly those pieces are supposed to be Azurite. And I like it. What about you?
I absolutely agree. So I'm very excited that they've chosen to use a island expedition because the island expeditions were always so beautifully designed. It's such a shame that the actual game mechanic didn't work out because they were like visiting those islands is still one of my favorite things to do. And there's so much there that just has kind of disappeared. It's like dead content. This one was obviously one they never used before, but I would actually love to see them use other island expedition maps in the future. Just find excuses for us to go back, you know? I think it's very clever the way that they brought it in, that the reason why there's Azurite and Kultiran stuff all over the place is because the Kultiran were here mining Azurite. It's also something I've realized with The War Within is The War Within has been continuing Battle for Azeroth's story in a way that we haven't been able to because we went to the Shadowlands. So a bunch of things that started in Battle for Azeroth actually never got wrapped up. For example, we never really dealt with Galliwex and the fact that we went back to Kazan and the rumors of the Undermine or any of that. And now there's all these little hints that we're going to find out. There's stuff about Azurite that we haven't actually that we don't quite understand to this day. And it's just really great to see these stories being revisited. I agree with you that it's like the Mechagon Isle. One of the things I realized right away when I arrived on it is there's no flying. There's a debuff called High Winds. The winds of the Siren Isle make it untraversable with flight. Someone actually pointed out to me that this ring that you get as part of the island, the Circe's Circlet, one of the buffs that you can eventually get later on seems to counteract the winds. So eventually you will be able to fly, which is exactly what Mechagon was like. And I really do like that because while I do think that this island is small enough that it makes sense not to fly in the beginning, whenever I go back to a zone and the zone doesn't have flying and I'm just going back for some, farming or something, it's so painful when you can't fly. I hate going to the Timeless Isle because of that. So I don't care if the flying only comes in after we're pretty much done with the island. I just love the fact that it is going to arrive. That said, again, it is a tiny isle. If anyone's worried about the fact that you can't fly, it's not like Forbidden Reach. Someone on Reddit actually pointed out that they ran from one side of the isle to the other and it took them 59 seconds. So it's really small. And if you could fly, honestly, it would be too small. So it does make perfect sense to just be on the ground, which is not something I usually advocate at all. But I get it for this particular time. Plus, I'm biased because I actually do want to use a ground mount quite a lot these days because I have Tavain, and any excuse to ride around on this giant dog is something I am very happy with.
I also think that just gameplay wise, being able to fly would be game breaking. Just utterly game breaking. There are points where you get a little rocket, like super powered rocket shoes. It's actually a rocket backpack, so that you can jump from like one place to another. And if you just had flying, whether that be dragon riding or rather sky riding or our normal steady flying, especially the normal steady flying, it would just absolutely break the puzzles that are in here. So for this particular zone, I think that flying needed to be curtailed, shut off, and perhaps if they are doing their standard war band, like, hey, once you do it on one character, you don't have to come and do it on another character. Yeah, maybe just let somebody get access to purchase the ring, make the ring itself account bound, so I could just send it around to my characters, and don't have additional players come here. Or like once it's unlocked, it just works towards it, and you can use it as an heirloom and just clone out that ring. Because to me, I would think that this would become a bit broken if, let's say, I complete it, get flying, you come in, and I go, here, hop on my mount, and then just take you around to everything. Like, I just think it should be experienced, because I really enjoyed the intro of this. The intro experience, if you are ready to discuss this.
Oh, yes.
Okay. The intro experience is something I really want more of in WoW. It was very story driven. It is uncovering this stuff that is connected to, like, oh, what is this crystal? Why did the Colterans disappear? What are these other forces doing here? And like, what is making this island so important? What is about it? And it is generally questing. I feel like an actual adventurer. I'm uncovering this stuff and being like, oh man, how's that going to connect to this? And like, oh, these guys are here, and like, wait a second, I recognize this architecture. It is so much of what I want from WoW, and specifically the War Within, of pulling in all of these threads, these loose ends. I'm so happy about the intro questing so far.
Yes, I agree. One of the things that I've really liked about it is it has these tablets that you go as we're looking for the crystal. There's these glittering ancient tablets that tell a story about Cersei and about this crystal that's on the island. And one thing I've found really interesting is it's the third tablet. It says the crystal's name is Himosul. So we've got a name. And it doesn't sound like Beladar Genadar, so it's different. It's Himosul, the luminous heart. And while Beladar and the Shard of Pure Light in Classic are both crystals that came from the sky, with Beladar people getting prophecies, seeing a falling star, with the Shard of Pure Light people talking about it being a tear of Anshi, which means it fell from the sun. Himosul came from below, It says, "From the darkness of the earth she called, from the warring north we heard." And if you look at the crystal, I can't find it in game at the moment, but I'll highlight it if I do. If you look at it, the ground around it is actually kind of pushed up, as if the crystal has been coming up instead of going down, which I think is really interesting. I mean, that might be a coincidence, but hey, there you are.
Hey. So we are here at Irisol.
Well, yes, but this isn't the crystal that's the chamber that's inside, like the underground chamber.
That's further along.
Yes.
But keep talking.
Another thing that's really interesting is the crystal is found. So we will find this chamber, but this chamber is surrounded by Vrykul architecture, and in fact, you deal with Vrykul spirits who are kind of golden. It's almost as if the Vrykul are infused with the light. There's 2 statues of Valajar by the crystal, which is a clear sign of Odin's involvement. And while I was researching this, I realized something about Odin. I don't know if anyone has noticed, but every time we talk about Odin on this podcast, I have a tendency to start confusing the fact that he's from Order and start talking about the light. And then I always realize, no, but he's a Titan keeper, and I switch back to Order. But actually, the reason I confuse Odin with the light is because he is a follower of the light. In fact, in exploring Azeroth Northrend, they mention Odin is a follower of the light, and his Valajar are warriors of the light. I spoke to Noble about this, and he pointed out that the the Titans in general do seem to have like almost a friendship with the light in a way that they don't have with other forces. Tyr obviously has associations with the light as well because of being a paladin and everything. So I'm not entirely sure at which point Odin became aligned with the light. I mean, he was the one who wrote that we mustn't tell anyone about the first ones because the only thing they should know is the Titans. Like, his original writings are very Titan orientated. And then later on, he becomes more, obviously, a follower of the light. So I'm very curious to know when that happened. And part of me wonders if these chambers have anything to do with that. For those who are watching the stream or watching on YouTube, you can see we're in the chambers now with these golden-tinted Vrykul hanging around. In fact, see, their statues have this light sparks on them as well. And we're approaching not Beladar. We're approaching this crystal. It seems to shine with light. There's the Valajar statues beside it.
Yeah. And the fact that they are crystal sworn memories that thus radiate with that light. The fact that the light is, oh, I didn't know that this was quest tips here. And this is just like a splinter of it, like the shrine that they made from it. I genuinely am surprised by this because just like we were talking about this the last time, where it's like, okay, when we get to this island, what's going to be the nature of this crystal? Is it going to be light infused? Is it going to be life infused? Is it going to affect the world around it? Right? And we have now begun to see that. We see these Valkyr that are light infused. This might actually have been what caused Odin to maybe turn towards the light in a way. We see the fact that like all of these creatures have migrated here. And that's something that they were talking about when they were teasing this as well.
One of the interesting aspects about this chamber is you see these big stones around the crystal. these big rune stones. So I was certain I'd seen these stones before, but they're not Vrykul runes. The Vrykul runes are more like the ones in that sort of bedazzled game that you get. And I asked around, and Cov in my Discord server managed to find pretty much the same rune stones all over Drustvar. They quite often circle things like altars and stuff. So I think these stones were put up by the Cool to Run before they disappeared, which I think is a really neat little detail.
Ooh, I see. I love this overlap of the different cultures that we've come to, the Kulterans and the Valajar. I wonder, because we were talking about the name, I wonder if it is two different names for the same thing. Even if they are calling it something different now, we don't know how deep that shard goes and what the bottom of it might be. I'm wondering if it is going to be Beladar or a different crystal. It's quite surprising, but if we are going into the next patch, and this is 11.0.7, so it's going to lead us into the next patch, to find another crystal where perhaps we see Xal'atath repeating what she was trying to do in Hollowfall, and then getting an understanding of that is going to be huge in my mind. The fact that we have, not that we've experienced it so far, but again, something that they had teased about was, oh, the Dalaran survivors. Who's a big Dalaran survivor? Of course, our dear old Dadgar. Right? And he's got the literal inside knowledge of what's going on with with the soul. Sorry, I don't want to call it the dragon soul. I apologize. I'm blanking on the name.
Dark Heart.
The Dark Heart. He literally was inside the Dark Heart as energy and then escaped it when Ilaria broke it. So he's got the inside knowledge. It's all coming together.
You just froze quickly. Can you just repeat that from Khadgar? He's got...
So Khadgar was in the explosion of Dalaran, and he turned himself into energy and got absorbed into the Dark Heart and escaped when Ilaria ruptured it. So he's got the literal inside knowledge of the inner workings of the Dark Heart. And we are dealing with the Dalaran survivors as well, as they said when they were teasing this patch. So I think this is, like we said, a good time for Khadgar to come back and talk about that. I know there's that rumor that he might be like a corrupted or now a sleeper agent. I don't think that to be the case, but I do think we are going to start getting more information about the Dark Heart now.
So the scary thing about the Dark Heart is what it can do is it can take any other energy and transfer it into shadow. So if this is a light crystal, it could turn it into a void crystal, the same as Beladar. And as you mentioned, there is still potential that this is the top of Beladar. We don't know for certain yet. When I first saw the preview, I thought it was probably not because it's so much smaller. But of course, it could be a tip of the iceberg situation where most of the crystal is underground. And then, as we play through the introduction quest, they do make it clear that this crystal is essentially across under the island. This is one part of it. The other part that we passed by earlier was from the same crystal. So it is big. It is big enough to be Beladar.
It is huge. And I love that they quickly make that confirmation where it's like, yes, as you said, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly. I was going to mention something else as well. Oh, yes, of course. The big thing that we have to talk about is the ring. And it's not because I'm excited about the ring. I don't really care either way. I mean, I know people feel positive and negative about these dynamics. Personally, I don't hate having a ring that's tied to a zone that gives you, like, it's guaranteed to be powerful. You know, I tend to enjoy it. But the main thing is that the ring is called Circe's circlet. And Circe is a character from Greek mythology. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that Circe in World of Warcraft is the Circe from Greek mythology, but there are a lot of things about the mythological creature that, first of all, it parallels the World of Warcraft character, and secondly, it's just interesting. So, first of all, Circe, the World of Warcraft character, has been described as a siren. And this island that we're on is called Siren Isle. And the crystal sings and hums and is what has called people to the isle. And if you read through these notes, these ancient tablets, they actually make it clear that the song, it comes from the crystal, but it comes from Circe as well. And Circe, what surprised me, what's revealed in the tablets, is she seems to have been Titan forged, because they describe her as an imposing metal skin figure, which has to be a Titan forged figure. And upon her hand is a gauntlet, which is very interesting. Some other things about the Circe from myth. So Circe, in mythology, Circe is not a siren, but she is related to the sirens. She's an ancient sorceress. She lives on her own island, so Siren Isle. She calls sailors to her island with her song. So even though she's not a siren, she kind of acts like one. She also is the character who tells Odysseus how to deal with the sirens. So there's a lot of paintings of her with the sirens. Like, she is associated with sirens in mythology. It's a big thing. And something I found particularly interesting is Circe is the daughter of Helios. Now, Helios is the god of the sun. And I thought, is that Apollo? Because everyone knows about Apollo. Apollo is the god of the sun who grants people the gift of prophecy. It's a meme. But Helios is not actually Apollo. They are sometimes, like, I think later on, they were sort of related to each other and sometimes acted as different aspects of the same being. But the difference is Helios is very specifically the personification of the sun, whereas Apollo, as far as I know, just carries the sun around in his chariot. And I thought that's such an interesting distinction, because one thing I have been going on and on and on about lately is Anshi, the Tauran god of the sun, who is also a personification of the sun. And how at least one of these shards of light, one of these crystals, we know is supposed to have come from Anshi. So if Circe is a child of Anshi as well, that's just, there's definitely some hints there that we could be playing around with.
I am incredibly excited. Warcraft, I think some of its best characters are characters that, like, some of its best mythological characters are characters that they have evolved or iterated on from mythology. Like the Titan Keepers, they're there. When we went and did the Egyptian themes and we started going into like old gods and stuff, they borrowed heavily from different mythologies, and they've made it their own. I look at this and I wonder if we are going to be dealing with, because we already started dealing with Odin, and I thought to myself, what in the world was Helia before she became like the Helia we know today? And if like that was what like kind of caused a bit of what we're seeing here, if maybe because Odin's never been a good guy, maybe if Odin kind of co-opted that and Cersei was what Hellier was originally, was like a flash in my head at first, because as we get further, like I know that some Titans are light aligned, but they are order first, and bending that light towards order, that kind of undermining, I want to sort of see take place. So like, there's a lot here that like I'm excited about where exactly they go from. Maybe it is that Cersei is captured in some sort of way, or maybe it is that like the Earthen came across Cersei and that's one of the memories that was taken away from them. So like there's a lot here to see if there was interaction before or ahead. And this is again another time where Order says, oh no, that's not part of what we do, and just rips it away from people who were seeing the good in it.
I mean, on that note, one of the things that I find really interesting about Cersei is I'm not sure that they mention she's a siren in the quest line, but they do mention it in the preview. And I didn't have a lot of time to research it, but I just did a quick look up on the sirens. And from what I can tell, we don't actually know where they come from, but they do tend to be around Kulturas. And now I know that Cersei, who's supposed to be an ancient siren, was a Titan Forged. So that suggests that the sirens come from the Titan Forged. So what happened? What turned them into sirens? I'd love to know more, and if maybe that's got to do with it. It's some sort of perversion of the creatures. Or, I mean, in the same way that Hellier was transformed by Odin, maybe turning the Cersei and her followers into sirens was a punishment or something like that. Whatever it was, I mean, it feels like they really should examine it.
I am excited to see them examine it. I really hope they do examine it. I'm really more hopeful now because we are at a point where things are coming back from the past, and they are pulling that stuff together, and that there's like this solid questing behind it, this solid sort of exploration behind it as well. Because again, this is just previewing, lining up where we're going in the future. I also notice that the different chambers that we went to in here require an active storm. So that means that we're dealing with something like kind of nature aligned. Are the sirens, because the sirens are all out at sea and they attract people when they're at sea. And back in BFA, I thought, oh, maybe they are just like a different type of Naga that is working that way. But now that we've had the sirens being separated into this, I'm wondering if the sirens are maybe, like you said, the corruption or punished, diminished form of something that came before them, or if they are something just like wholly unique to Azeroth, much like we had like the original trolls that changed and so forth. So I'm hoping we get some further exploration of this. It could be, when I'm talking about trolls, I immediately go to the Heronar. What if this second crystal is really close to Beladar? What if it is around and encircled by the stump of the roots of the original world tree?
That is interesting. It would be, if the storms come from life, that would certainly explain it. And of course, we have reason to believe we will head into the Lifelands at some point, because there is a map that shows it in relation to Halifall. That is a really good point. But I must return again to the tablets, just in some of the hints that we got from them. One of the things they mention is Cersei has a majestic winged creature that sits on her shoulder. Threyr, the eyes of Cersei, born amongst peaks of storm. So that is probably a reference to the mount that we're going to get. There's a storm, it's like a storm crow or something, that has been in the data files since freaking Mists of Pandaria, and they are finally giving it to us. So I assume that it's got to do with, like, this Eyes of Cersei has to do with the storm. But they also mention the storms towards the end. They call it the final storm. The tremors ceased and waves churned anew. The metallic figures are outnumbered. Allies in the form of winged humanoids and stone golems fight at their side, but the human monoliths depict a fearsome battle between metallic figures and serpentine creatures emerging from the waves. So there's this Titan-forged army fighting these serpentine creatures from the waves. And we do know that there's going to be this whole these storm events where we fight what does look like giant sea serpents. But what caused that? Where did that come from? If it was life, it could be the light had some sort of hold over the world soul with this fragment, and life was attempting to get it or something. I mean, for now, I don't really know.
Yeah, the storms come on a regular basis. In fact, there is a scenario where the storms come in, the entire encampment that it serves as your home base packs up, and new enemies come in, those serpents and so forth that you have to deal with, and you have to fight them off. During that phase, I think we would go back to the cave, and maybe that's when these things are active. Again, it's this entire second layer to the island, much like Mechagon. You could go into the future imperfect. This one, you go into the storm phase, as it were. And I think it's just, again, another way of them layering in even more secrets into the same space, because now you've got the two different levels that you have to that you deal with. To know that there is lore, that it isn't like, obviously it is being used as a mechanical method to do this, but the lore and making and attracting these storms so frequently to the island is intriguing for sure.
Absolutely. Before we wrap up, I do have to ask you though, you have brought up your favorite patch theory, the Lifelands. I want to ask you, did you spot the undermine hint in the preview?
They had a screensaver behind her with Karazhan.
Well,
there was, sorry, with Kazan. Sorry, not Karazhan. With Kazan. I would be happy for it to happen. I don't want the crystal there. It just feels odd to have the goblins beside such a thing and it not have become like just public knowledge, because all of the cartels go through the Undermine, right? They all like trade there before they started setting up outposts like in Tanaris or in the far north of Kalimdor. So it seems weird to me to be like, yeah, we're here, and here's this relevant thing that we just forgot to mention all these years.
Well,
I don't know.
To be fair, as far as most goblins are aware, including Gazlo, the Undermine was destroyed and there's no access to it. It's only recently that it's been discovered that the venture company have access to Undermine. And the venture company are pretty much the worst kind of goblin stereotype you can think of. They're incredibly greedy, incredibly destructive. I think Gallywix ruled them at one point, but whether he did or not, it's definitely sort of Gallywix sort of way of thinking. And if they had access to the Undermine and there was something valuable there, then I don't think that they would share that information. I think they would keep it secret. That said, I don't really think this crystal in particular will have anything to do with the Undermine. But there's something that I recently rediscovered is the first time anyone discovered azurite was long before Battle for Azeroth. Now, obviously, you know why azurite came up to the surface was because Sargeras pierced the soul of Azeroth with his sword. The sword went so deep, it actually damaged the world soul itself. And Azeroth started bleeding and that became azurite. But the goblins found azurite back before Cataclysm, which is long before any swords approached the world soul. They mined so deep that they found this ore. When they cut into it, it was liquid at first, and then it solidified. And it was beautiful, but when it solidified, it turned red. And Gallywix blames this for, he personally thinks the volcano was actually this. It wasn't Deathwing that caused the volcano. It was the goblins doing a bit of the dwarves dug too greedily and too deep sort of thing. So that, by the sounds of that, it means that the goblins dug all the way to the world soul. The Undermine reached the world soul. They cut into it and got some azurite. And as I said, the crystal was red for many, many years. And then when Azeroth was stabbed, the crystal turned gold. And the other time that we've seen something like that happen is the first time that Beladar turned to the dark. It was when Azeroth was stabbed, suggesting this is all the world soul. It's all connected. It still feels like the world soul clearly still communicates with chunks of world soul, whether it be Azerite, whether it be Beladar. So I think that we will go to Undermine, but I think it's because it will take us to the center of Azeroth, that parallel to the core way, which we also know is going to the center of Azeroth. I do have to point out as well, it's not just a screensaver in that video. The lady in front of the screensaver, I'm afraid I don't have her name right now, she's wearing a pin. And I thought it's a very colorful pin. And I spent ages trying to find one on their store, and I couldn't. And I gave up. And then I thought, well, let me go into Kazan with a goblin and get a screenshot just for that part. And I went in, and all over Kazan, there are these giant banners of a goblin with Kajamite, advertising Kajamite. And it's that pin. She's wearing that pin. So that's...
Oh, that is...
like... that is way more... that is so purposeful. They've actually made something around it.
Yeah, there's no way that is a coincidence. That is clearly meant to get the eagle-eye people like you. I gotta ask though. You're talking about crystal that when it calcified, we'll say, turned red. There is a mineral deposit in the game that was introduced with the War Within, Acherite. And it is a blood red ore that looks like azurite. Do you think that is connected somehow?
Wow, that did not occur to me at all. But that is a very good point. I'm going to have to quickly go over to Azkahet to take a look at that. But
and in
you're
fact,
right.
when it's
and it's deep down.
Yeah.
It's not on because you can't mine it in the Isle of Dawn. It's only in the lower 2 zones.
That
Which means
seems
it's closer to the
again
world soul.
using mechanics to share that. I'm gonna go on my miner. I know we're wrapping up here, but I just want to quickly jump onto my miner and see if I can look in the journal to see if there's any knowledge about it. But you go over and show the ore itself. But that is blood red, unless it's like one of the special ones. The crystallized version looks like azurite because it's got that blue and the gold. And there's a corrupted version that's just purple. But it's there's something going on there, I think, because that is just too on the nose.
You're right. Although it does make me wonder why that crystal has stayed red while so many, why Gallywix's crystal turned gold. Of course, now I will not be able to find a deposit.
I will give you a little bit of the dungeon journal here. We've got the acarite, and it is a rare metal found throughout Khazalgar. While it can sometimes be found on the surface, its prevalence increases as one nears Azkahet. Although it has various uses, engineers in particular often take keen interest in acquiring large quantities of it. Now, it says further, due to their proximity to the coreway, some deposits have a direct connection with the world soul. Miners who gather from them will receive a small blessing in addition to some crystalline powder, a useful reagent in many crafts. But that's the
interesting.
Yeah. Very, very odd.
I will keep searching for it. You would think that there's some acarite. Right.
Watch it be webbed so you can't see much of it.
No, it's not webbed, thankfully. Can you imagine if one day we log in and all the acarite has turned a sort of goldish blue, the same way that azurite goes?
I don't know, but it's like it's so weird that you mentioned that little piece of lore, and then we've got these crystals that look so much like it for that the acarite deposits, and how that's put together. I don't put it past Blizzard, because we have had Serenite, the blood of an old god, be so core to story, and I would love for them to just add in this little bit of an Easter egg.
I mean, this whole blood of this, blood of that is a crystal, is the thing that we mine. It does seem to be more and more we are discovering that this is the case, that this is where mining deposits come from. They're the blood of one creature or another. It would be really interesting if it turned out that all of the ores are actually from different denizens of, the light and of life and of chaos and all the things.
It's like, oh, we've got poor Dad Valkyr. That's where we get our iron back in vanilla.
An alternative could be that when we say, for example, the blood of an old god, something I realized is the old gods, obviously they are attached to Azeroth's world soul to the point where if you pull them out, it causes a giant gaping wound that creates blood, which suggests to me parasites that are feeding on the world soul. So I would believe that the old gods are filled with Azeroth's blood, in the same way that I suspect crystals like Beladar are. In which case, maybe the reason why the blood of the old god crystallizes is not because of the old god, but because of Azeroth's blood. But it's the old god blood that makes it old god tainted, but the crystallized part is Azeroth.
Yeah, it gains some aspects of what it's feeding off of. Remember, we have said multiple times in this show, and they have said in the game, that these old gods are trying to consume Azeroth. Maybe it isn't so much that they corrupt it in a direct way where it's just they gain enough influence that it starts thinking in the way that they want, but rather that it drains all of the essence, and then those old gods transcend and become void lords themselves.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
And killing the host in the process, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. Which would make so much sense in terms of like how they are so deeply enrooted in the planet, and how when you like try to extract them, it hurts the world soul itself, because they become so attached, they latch on so much, almost like a tick sucking the blood out of the world soul host.
Exactly. And on that note, I've flown up towards Beladar again, because I just want those who can see, if you look at Beladar, it's not just a golden crystal. It has that blue sheen, that blue tint that we've come to expect from Azurite. It does actually look very much like the crystal that we are seeing in Siren Isle. And that is, again, as we know now, these are, well, at least Beladar is probably a world soul crystal. That is Azeroth's world soul that's causing it to look that way.
It's gorgeous.
It is.
I love it. It to me. All right, I gotta ask your bet. Are we looking at the other end of Beladar, or have we found another crystal? Because they have said there are other crystals, but it would be a little surprising to find two of these crystals so close together when we had to dig so deep using the core way to find the first one.
I do think that at the very least we are meant to think it's Beladar. I'm not willing to place too much of a bet because I keep changing my mind. Sometimes I think, yeah, of course it's Beladar. Other times I think, but they made such a fuss about there being different crystals. I think it's fascinating that it is clearly similar to Beladar, but what I don't understand is, surely if it was Beladar, then when Beladar turns voidy, the top half would turn void as well. And we would notice that. We are clearly there for long enough to be able to see the void change, because the void turn happens every 2 hours or something. And that alone makes me hesitate and think maybe it isn't Beladar. But it is actually a lot closer to Beladar than I was expecting. I was actually expecting for it to either very clearly be Beladar from the moment we see it, or for it to be a completely different crystal, one that doesn't have this light infusion. And instead, it's this light-infused crystal. Well, I think, because it's not as shiny as, for example, the Shard of Pure Light or as Beladar, but it is still shiny.
There isn't a beam of light coming out from it.
Yes. But as I said, the fact that it doesn't turn to void just seems to indicate to me that it is a different crystal, unless only the bottom half of Beladar turns to the void, which would be weird.
I have a question. Have you been to the crystal during any of the storm phases? Have you done the storm phase?
No, I have not seen a storm phase.
Okay, the first storm phase is triggered by a scenario. And when we are initially traveling around in Hallowfall, the shadow phase is done based on the story. Like, you are phased in a way so that you can get the story to line up properly. What if, and this will have to be on further testing, every 3 hours, just like Beladar, a storm comes in. And so this crystal is shifting from the default to a storm crystal.
Now that is an interesting point, because when would the storms have started as well? It would have been around, if the storm started around the same time that Beladar started going to the void, in other words, after Azeroth was stabbed by the sword, then it could all be related somehow.
Like, they're sympathetic. So Azeroth was affected through one of the crystals through Xal'atath's tinkering. Beladar started shifting into dark, but this what is it? Homalar? Yeah, I forget what it's called, unfortunately. This crystal started shifting towards the elements.
It's Hymosol, I think.
Hymasol, okay. That would be something incredibly interesting.
It would be. So for now Melithian in the chat has said, I think it's just an Azerite shiny, not light shiny. And that is a good point. That's the thing, is I can't tell. I mean, it is clearly glowing, but Azerite does glow as well. But Azerite also has this golden tint. Is Azerite... It is beginning to make me think, again, is it possible that the world soul is a light world soul? That this whole time, Azeroth has been naturally a creature of the light that they're trying to turn into order. Instead of a first one soul or anything like that, but actually already belonging to a different pantheon. Like, it's really hard to tell.
It is, and we only assume that Beladar is shifting between light and shadow because it's so clearly shifting shadow and it's giving off light. And of course the Arathi are like, yeah, light, but they are just as faulty narrators as anybody else, and they could just be like, it's giving off light, therefore it is light. It could just be giving off light and be a byproduct of it being a radiant crystal. And
yet it sent out visions. I mean, their emperor saw the vision. It's named after the emperor's vision. Which again, it called to them from across the sea, which is exactly what the crystal on Siren Isle did. Again, I find it so interesting that the emperor's vision was of the fallen star, but the Siren Isle talk about it's the first time we've seen people talking about the crystal coming from below. That's fascinating to me. But I think we are supposed to wrap up now.
Yep. There are many things. There's many things and aspects that we have yet to explore as we go through the PTR, as we talk about it more, as we get more story. Because again, this has had a strong story start. I am looking forward to uncovering more about this crystal, and pardon the pun there, and talking about it in future episodes.
Yeah, me too. But for now, where can people find you, TruVillainManny?
Well, you can find me on Blue Sky and most socials at TruVillainManny. That's true without the E. And where can people find you?
You can find me at Discordian Kitty across social media and on YouTube, where I will be releasing a video soon about Siren Isle and the Undermine. And you can find me on Blue Sky as well. I much prefer Blue Sky to Twitter these days. It's much better.
Yeah, I'm sort of done with Twitter. Sorry, Twitter.
So until next time, hail Xal'atath!
Hail Xal'atath!